Max, you're scrubbing the floor? Bonnie stood frozen at the entrance of the mansion's marble-floored hall, her voice coated in disbelief. I didn't look up. I didn't stop. I wrung out the mop and kept going, every stroke a silent scream. She took a step closer, heels tapping against the pristine tiles. Where's Cynthia? Why are you doing the cleaning? Still, I said nothing. Bonnie stared for a few seconds longer, then walked off like she had better things to do. Like, everything about this house was beneath her, but this house, it was mine. They just didn't know it yet. The same girl who used to call me that extra boy was now walking through rooms built on the blood they stole from me. The same girl who lived the life meant for me, carried on her back by a lie my family never corrected. And now, when the truth was already breaking through the cracks, she still couldn't see me as anything but disposable. I watched the water pool near my knees. Bonnie's perfume still lingered in the air, sweet and suffocating. A year ago, I would have given anything to hear her say my name like that, confused, maybe a little concerned. But now, even hearing her voice made something sharp twist in my chest, because she didn't choose me. She chose them. Back then, I was just the house help, the quiet one, the orphaned nobody they kept around because I owed them my life. Now I was the legal heir. And today was just the beginning. They made Cynthia the star of every room while I cleaned their shoes in silence. But the blood running through my veins was louder than the lies they built their empire on. I had the DNA test. I had the property deed. I had every single receipt ready. They raised her in gold. They left me to crawl in the dirt. And now they were about to learn what happens when the forgotten son walks back into the house with the keys they thought were theirs. When I was 7, I found out I was adopted, but it wasn't the kind of tearful, heartfelt revelation kids dream about. No one sat me down gently. No one explained with warmth in their eyes. I overheard it, by accident, while scrubbing the stairs. Cynthia was whining about why she couldn't go to the summer villa, and her mother, the woman I thought was mine too, snapped, "You want to trade places with him? Be grateful, he's not even ours, and he's still cleaning your shoes." That's how I learned who I really was. Max, the outsider, the extra, the mistake they never meant to keep. From that day on, I stopped asking questions. I stopped calling her mom. I stopped celebrating my birthday. And when the housekeeper changed my name in the records to Staff, I didn't correct her. It didn't matter. Nothing I did ever did. Cynthia was the princess of the house. She had a room with pink walls and gold trim, a walk-in closet filled with designer dresses, and a father who brought her fresh orchids every Sunday morning. When she smiled, the whole house came alive. When she cried, everyone scrambled. Me? I learned to make myself invisible. Useful, but silent. I memorized how many seconds it took for tea to steep just right. I knew how the master liked his shirts, folded, and what side of the bed he preferred his newspaper placed. I had routines, habits, silence. What I didn't have, what I couldn't afford to have, was emotion. Bonnie entered our lives when I was 16. She was everything Cynthia wasn't. Quiet. Focused. She came from an ordinary family but carried herself like she'd been born royalty. Her scholarship had gotten her into the same elite prep academy that Cynthia had coasted into. I met her for the first time when she wandered into the estate on a Saturday afternoon, holding a file of internship documents and asking for directions. I'd been trimming hedges, dirt under my fingernails, sweat lining my jaw. She didn't even flinch. "You work here?" she asked, head tilted, curious. "Yeah. But you talk like you've read Tolstoy." "I have." And for some reason, she smiled at that. We started talking. She came by once a week for a tutoring program Cynthia was too busy shopping to attend, and I happened to be the only one willing to help. We shared coffee on the back steps. She liked hers black. I didn't drink any. We never made it more than 30 minutes before Cynthia came stomping down with her arms crossed, dragging Bonnie away with some excuse about dress fittings or brunch appointments. Bonnie never said much. But I caught the look sometimes, little things, like how her eyes lingered when I spoke, or how she laughed quietly at jokes no one else noticed. The way she always said my name, Max, like it meant something. But feelings didn't belong to people like me, not when they'd spent their lives being reminded they were lucky just to be included in the photo. So I buried it. She and Cynthia eventually became inseparable, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. Wherever Cynthia went, Bonnie followed. Dresses, parties, invitations. Bonnie became a part of their world, her world. The one I watched from behind the wine racks and laundry baskets. Then, one night, I heard the laughter again. Only this time, it wasn't outside my door. It was inside the house library. I was dusting the shelves when I turned a corner and saw Cynthia curled on the couch, her heels kicked off, wine glass in hand. Bonnie sat beside her, fidgeting. "She's boring, isn't she?" Cynthia said, half drunk. Bonnie didn't answer. "I mean, it's sweet she tries so hard, but it's obvious, right? The way she stares at you." Bonnie looked away. "Don't start." "Oh, come on," Cynthia giggled. "You really think Max believes someone like you could fall for someone like him?" I dropped the duster. They turned to look at me. Cynthia didn't even blink. "Oh, you were here?" That was the last time I let myself imagine what love might feel like. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay their shadow any longer. If I was nothing to them, then I'd become something on my own. I began saving, working twice as hard, applying to schools under a different surname. The master and mistress of the house barely noticed, just fewer tasks for them to bark about. They never knew that while I folded towels, I was memorizing business textbooks. While I polished silver, I was studying genetics. While I cleared the dinner table, I was writing emails to a lawyer who'd tracked down my birth records. Then, on my 21st birthday, I found the truth. I wasn't adopted out of pity. I'd been stolen. My real parents had been business, partners of the family. There'd been a crash, chaos. The documents were forged. Cynthia had been passed off as the rightful heir because the truth would have destroyed the name they built. My blood was thicker than every lie they'd fed me. The house, the company, the name, they were mine. And now I mopped the floor by choice. Because it was the last day they'd ever speak to me like I didn't belong. The letter arrived in a gold-trimmed envelope. Cynthia tossed it onto the table like it was junk mail, not realizing the seal meant everything was about to change. I picked it up slowly, staring at the family crest etched into the wax. The attorney's signature confirmed it. This was official. She sipped her juice, scrolling through her phone. "Another charity gala invitation? Just throw it out, or give it to Dad. He loves those boring events." I didn't respond. I opened the envelope. Inside was a certified notice. Final confirmation of asset transfer, property title change, and legal acknowledgement of identity. Max Donovan. Biological son of Patrick and Clarissa Donovan. Legal heir to the Donovan estate, holdings, and trust. Cynthia didn't even glance up. I folded the letter neatly, slid it into my pocket, and walked out of the room. That afternoon, Bonnie arrived. At the estate, her face flushed from the sun and her smile casual. She waved at the staff as if she lived here now. Cynthia called out from upstairs, "Bonnie, come help me pick out a dress for the winter soiree. Dad's letting me host it this year." I waited by the stairwell. Bonnie paused when she saw me, one foot still on the marble step. Her expression flickered, just for a second, but she offered a polite nod before hurrying up. No words, no questions. I couldn't blame her. From the outside, nothing had changed. The help still kept their heads down. The daughter of the house still ruled the halls. And Max? He was still invisible, still scrubbing floors, still serving tea, still folding the same linen napkins he'd folded since he was a boy. Except this time, Max owned everything he touched. For tea, sir, sire. I entered the master study. Brandon was leaning back in the leather chair, sipping whiskey. His eyes narrowed the moment he saw me. "What do you want?" he muttered, not bothering to hide his annoyance. I placed the documents on his desk. He glanced at them, scoffed, then froze. His knuckles tightened around the glass. "Where did you get this?" "From my lawyer, and the hospital records, and the DNA lab." Brandon stood up so fast the chair rolled back behind him. This means nothing. You think some paper gives you the right to barge into my office like this? No, I said calmly. It gives me the right to own the office. He lunged toward me. You ungrateful little... Before he could say more, the door opened. Cynthia stood there, confused. What's going on? Brandon regained his composure instantly. Nothing, just reminding the staff of boundaries. She looked between us, but didn't press. Later that night, I found Bonnie sitting alone on the garden bench. She didn't hear me approach at first, lost in thought. When she finally noticed me, she straightened slightly. Max, she said softly. You okay? Define okay. She gave a small, sad laugh. You always deflect like that. There was silence between us for a few seconds. Then I asked, do you remember the day you came to this house the first time? She blinked. Of course. You were in the garden. You helped me find the office. I also told you I'd read Tolstoy. Her gaze softened. I remember. I sat down beside her, keeping just enough distance. Back then, did you ever think someone like me could be someone like this? Bonnie looked confused. Someone like what? Someone who didn't need pity, or saving, or permission to exist. She exhaled slowly. I never pitied you, Max. Did you love me? The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Bonnie's breath caught, but she didn't speak. That night, I continued, when Cynthia said those things in the library, you didn't defend me. She was drunk, she whispered. So were you silent? She looked down at her hands. You think I chose her over you? Didn't you? Her shoulders tensed. I was stuck. Between her and you. Between what I felt and where I came from. And I chose the easier path, I finished. Bonnie didn't argue. I stood. Don't worry. Soon everyone in this house will know exactly where they stand. The next morning, the legal notice was posted on the estate bulletin. A short, formal line printed in black ink. Effective immediately, Max Donovan is recognized as the rightful heir of the Donovan family and assumes full legal authority over the estate. Brandon smashed a vase. Cynthia locked herself in her room. Bonnie didn't say a word. But the staff looked at me differently. For the first time, they bowed not out of fear, but respect. That evening, I walked into the kitchen. Cynthia stood at the island, arms crossed, eyes red. You lied, she hissed. You set us up. No, I said. I waited. You're just bitter, jealous. You always wanted what I had. No, I corrected. You had what was mine. Cynthia shook her head, furious. So what now? You think I'll clean your floors? You think I'll bow to you? No, I said, my voice steady. I think you'll finally see what it feels like to be invisible. The walls of the estate felt colder now. Not because winter had come early, but because everything I'd once hoped for, once craved, now stood before me like a hollow trophy. I had the title, the signatures, the name on the deed. But none of it filled the space that had opened inside me the day Bonnie walked away without a word. I walked the hall alone, past the portraits of a family that had denied me, past Cynthia's old piano where I'd once cleaned silently while she played off-key. The sound of silence now was deafening. There were no apologies, no confessions, only stares. Some fearful, some resentful. I had forced the truth out, and now every corner of this house whispered something back. But none of it was welcome. At night, I couldn't sleep. I would lie on the bed, that was once Brandon's, staring at the ceiling and wondering how many times they had stood in this same spot talking about how to keep me small, how to convince the world I was lucky to serve them. Every polished surface reminded me of the hands that used to make me polish it. And yet now I had the power to replace every vase, every curtain, every light bulb. It didn't matter. The bitterness was still there, thick in my throat, like I had swallowed betrayal so many times it had started tasting normal. And Bonnie, she had vanished. No text, no call, not even a glance. She hadn't shown up when the announcement was made. She hadn't come to the ceremony. The one person who saw me back when I was no one, who smiled when I said Tolstoy, had disappeared the moment my name appeared in bold print. The truth hurt more than anything else. Maybe I never meant as much to her as she did to me. One afternoon, I finally saw her. She was at the edge of the estate garden, speaking with one of the new planners I had hired to redesign the north wing. Her voice was soft, and her hair danced in the breeze the way it always had. I stood watching from behind the glass. She didn't turn around. Did she know I was there? Did she even care? I wanted to believe she did. I wanted to believe that there was something left, something real beneath all the silence. But how could I believe in anything now? I had spent years convincing myself that if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet long enough, kept my head down, someone would see me. Now everyone saw me, and I'd never felt more alone. Later that week, I hosted my first formal dinner as the head of the Donovan estate. Every seat was filled with smiles and clinking glasses, but none of them looked real. The faces were plastic. The conversations rehearsed. They laughed at my jokes, toasted to my name, but it was clear none of them knew who I truly was. When I stepped away from the table and walked outside, the cold air struck my face like truth. Bonnie was already there, standing by the fountain. Her eyes met mine. "I didn't think you'd come," I said, voice low. "I wasn't sure if I should," she replied. "I wasn't sure if I'd be welcome." "You were always welcome. You just chose to stay away." She didn't deny it. Silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Then she spoke slowly. "Max, I didn't know how to face you. Because I became what they never let me be? Or because you're scared I'm not the same person anymore?" She hesitated. "Both." I nodded, biting back the bitterness. "So it was easier to pretend I didn't matter." "No," she said quickly. "You've always mattered. But everything's different now." "You mean I'm not invisible anymore, so it's harder to ignore what you feel?" Bonnie looked down. "What I feel scares me." That made me pause. In all the years I'd known her, she had never said anything that raw. I stepped closer. "You think it's easier for me? You think being in this house, wearing his suits, sitting in the chair Brandon once sat in, makes me feel powerful?" "I don't feel power, Bonnie. I feel empty." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then why keep going?" "Because I have to." My voice cracked. "Because if I stop now, then everything I went through, every insult, every lie, every lonely night, means nothing." She looked at me then, really looked. "I never stopped seeing you," she whispered. "Even when I stayed silent, even when I followed Cynthia around like a coward, I just didn't think I had the right to choose you." I wanted to believe her, but belief had become a dangerous thing. "Then why now?" I asked. "Why come back now, when I'm no longer the boy hiding in the back hallway?" Bonnie took a shaky breath. "Because I want to be someone who's brave enough. Now." My heart thudded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. "I don't need you to fix anything," I said quietly. "But I need to know you're not here, because of the title, or the estate, or the weight of my name." "I'm here," she whispered, "because it's you, with or without all of it." I didn't answer. Not yet, because trust wasn't something I could give with a single promise. Not after everything I'd lost, but I didn't walk away either, and maybe that meant something. The next morning, the front gates were wide open, not for guests. Not for press, but for Brandon. He stood at the entrance of the estate with a police escort, flanked by 2 attorneys and a folded stack of documents in hand. His eyes locked onto mine the moment I stepped outside. "You think it ends here?" he shouted, voice cutting through the early light. "You think taking back a name means you've won?" Behind him, the officers didn't look surprised. They had clearly been briefed and paid. I didn't blink. "What are you trying to do, Brandon?" He walked up the steps slowly, a crooked smile on his face. You may have the deed, Max, but you're not the only one with secrets. He handed me a sheet of paper. At first, the numbers meant nothing. Then I saw the header. Offshore account transfers. Max Donovan, age 17. My jaw tightened. What is this? Looks like someone's been involved in a little embezzlement, he said, loud enough for the staff to hear. A minor back then, sure, but not now. That money moved under your name. You think the legal system cares who pressed the keys? It hit me like ice. I remembered those years. I'd been 17, studying finance, working late hours, accessing family records through the company's internal system just to learn. The passwords hadn't changed in years, but I'd never moved a cent. You forged this, I said quietly. Brandon smirked. That's the thing about power, Max. It's not about truth. It's about who can prove what before the other person speaks. Bonnie appeared behind me, eyes wide. What's happening? Brandon turned to her like an actor hitting his mark. Did he tell you how he laundered funds through shell companies overseas? I wonder how much of this estate he bought with stolen money. That's not true, she said, her voice rising. But doubt had already started creeping in. I could feel it. The tension in the air. The sudden shift in staff glances. Even Bonnie's hand, which had just touched mine the night before, now hovered an inch away. I looked at Brandon, the father who raised me with cold orders and quieter threats. You're scared, I said flatly. You know I'm stronger than you ever were. He leaned in close. Maybe, but I'm dirtier. And in this world, that still counts for something. I watched him leave the documents with the police. A formal complaint. A planned smear campaign. My stomach twisted. He didn't want to reclaim the estate. He wanted to bury me beneath it. Bonnie followed me into the house, silent for a long moment before finally whispering, You didn't do it, right? The question was small, but it carved something deep. I turned to her slowly. You're asking me that now? Her face fell. Max, I didn't mean it like... No, I said sharply. You did. I stepped back. The warmth from the garden, from the fountain, from last night's trembling confession, it vanished. All that was left was cold air and distance. Cynthia watched from the staircase, an unreadable expression on her face. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't smug, just quiet. As if she knew a storm was coming and wanted front row seats. Upstairs, in the office once called Brandon's, I opened the laptop and pulled up the archived server logs. I knew what I was looking for. The time, stamps, the login sessions, backdoor authorizations, digital fingerprints never lie. It was all there. One access session tied to my account, processed remotely. Originating from the main house Wi-Fi, but not from my device, from Cynthia's. She had done it. Or someone had done it for her. I stared at the screen, the truth pulsing in front of me, and realized something even worse. The attack hadn't come from desperation. It had come from preparation. They had planned this, not to get the estate back, but to drag me down enough to destroy any credibility I had built. I printed everything. I wasn't going down without a war. The boardroom was silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of heavy stillness that settles before an earthquake. I stood at the head of the long mahogany table. Brandon sat at the far end, leaning back like he owned the building, as if the chaos he'd unleashed hadn't shaken the entire foundation of the Donovan legacy. Cynthia twirled her pen lazily between her fingers. Bonnie was seated 2 chairs down, her face unreadable, eyes fixed on the folder in front of me. The legal team on Brandon's side had already spoken, loudly, theatrically, with dramatic gestures and highlighted allegations. Embezzlement, money laundering, abuse of fiduciary duty. All of it stacked with timestamps and fabricated data that looked pristine on paper. And now, it was my turn. I opened the folder slowly. In this room, I'm called a thief, I began, voice low. But the real theft started a long time ago. when a 7-year-old boy was handed a mop instead of a future. No one interrupted. I placed a set of server logs on the table. These are the access records from the Donovan internal system, traced back to 3 months before I turned 18. The transfers Brandon is accusing me of, they happened during a login session from Cynthia's tablet. Cynthia's hand froze mid-spin. I kept going. Location history, device ID, router IP match. This wasn't just sloppy, it was intentional. I turned to face Brandon. You forged everything, didn't you? You planted the evidence, you coached the officers, and you did it knowing that the boy you once made iron your suits would be too quiet to fight back. Brandon's lips curled into a smile. That's a bold theory. It's not a theory, I said, lifting the final sheet. Here's the digital certificate of encryption. Your old assistant signed off on it. And here's a video file, taken from the CCTV you forgot was still active in the south wing. I pressed play on the screen behind me. There he was, Brandon, middle of the night, logged into my account using a cloned device, tapping rapidly with a gloved hand. His face reflected in the screen's glass. Cynthia covered her mouth. Bonnie didn't move. The legal team shifted in. Their seats. I paused the video. You called me dirty, but you're the one with blood on your hands. Brandon stood, rage pulsing through his expression. So what? You think one little video makes you clean? Makes you a real Donovan? No, I said, walking toward him. What makes me a real Donovan is that even after you abandoned me, mocked me, used me, I still didn't turn into you. He laughed, bitter and raw. You think that makes you noble? You think these people care about truth? Look around, Max. This room runs on reputation and silence. You might win today, but you'll never erase who you used to be. I don't need to erase it, I said. I survived it. Bonnie finally stood up. Her voice was quiet but clear. I believed him at first, she said, because part of me still saw Max as the boy with calloused hands and secondhand shoes. But watching this, knowing what Brandon did, reminds me why I fell for the boy in the first place. Brandon scoffed. Of course. You always liked the broken ones. No, Bonnie replied. I just hate the ones who break people and smile about it. Cynthia stood slowly, her expression almost unsure. Dad, is this true? Brandon didn't respond. Cynthia blinked at him. You told me he stole everything. You said we had to stop him before he destroyed us. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. She turned to me, voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. You think I knew? That I was part of this? I didn't answer, because deep down, I didn't know what to believe anymore. Cynthia looked at Bonnie, then at the board, then back at me. If I step back, if I publicly renounce my claim, will that fix any of this? I looked at her. This girl who had taken so much from me without knowing how much she held in her hands. Maybe she really was as lost as I once was. It won't fix it, I said, but it'll stop the bleeding. She nodded once, sat down, and stared at the floor. Brandon took a step toward me. This isn't over. You're right, I said. It isn't. I opened one last document and slid it across the table toward him. A criminal complaint, a press-ready statement, and an official request for a restraining order. You wanted to bury me in scandal? I said. Let's see how the world treats a CEO who planted evidence against his own blood to protect a false heir. The room broke into hushed chaos. Brandon didn't speak again. Security escorted him out quietly. The door clicked shut, and I just stood there, breathing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting for space. I was the space. Bonnie waited until everyone had left. Then she walked over to me, slowly, deliberately, and asked, "What happens now?" I looked at her, the girl who had once stayed silent, who had once doubted me. And yet here she stood. Still here? I don't know, I admitted. But I think, for the first time, I get to decide. Bonnie smiled through her tears, turned off the projector, collected the evidence, and walked out of the boardroom into the hallway I used to scrub with a rag and bucket. And this time, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt real. 2 weeks after Brandon's expulsion from the estate, headlines exploded across every major news outlet. Corporate Heir was the true victim. Donovan Patriarch under investigation for fraud and tampering. False inheritance scandal rocks. Donovan Empire. Illegitimate heiress steps down in wake of shocking DNA reveal. The internet was merciless. Old photos of Brandon and Cynthia at charity events resurfaced under every news thread. Comments flooded in by the thousands. Some pitied Cynthia, others called for jail time. Most just couldn't believe that a boy once forced to mop the floors had been the rightful heir all along. Brandon's assets were frozen, legal proceedings had begun, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to fight for anyone to listen. But what surprised me most was Cynthia. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She showed up one morning in a plain sweater and no makeup, holding out a file. "I transferred my stake in the holding company to you," she said. "I also signed a sworn affidavit verifying the account manipulation." Stared at her. She looked different, smaller, quieter. "I don't want this to follow me," she added. "But I won't pretend I didn't benefit from it. This is my way of stepping out." I took the file from her hands. "Why now?" Cynthia met my eyes. "Because I saw what Dad became trying to erase you, and I don't want to become the same." She left without asking for forgiveness, and strangely I respected her more for it. But Brandon? He wasn't done. While awaiting formal indictment, he reached out from his holding cell through his lawyer. He wanted to speak to me, just once. One final meeting. I didn't reply. I sent him something instead. A single envelope with 2 documents inside. The civil suit's damages claim and a copy of the original forged financial log, with his assistant's confession attached. He never requested a meeting again. Bonnie started visiting the estate more frequently. She brought her quiet laughter and cautious glances, always waiting to see if I still carried resentment beneath the surface. But something between us had shifted. Not back to what it was, but forward into something more real. One evening, I found her walking the corridor lined with family portraits. She stopped at the last frame, an empty space that once held Brandon's photo. "Why didn't you replace it?" she asked. "I will," I said. "Eventually." "With who?" I smiled faintly. "No one for now. That space stays empty until I'm sure who deserves to be remembered." She didn't say anything, but her hand brushed mine gently. It was enough. I rebuilt the estate my way. Gone were the gold-plated locks and over-polished marble floors. I opened a scholarship fund under my mother's name for children who'd grown up forgotten in places like I once had. I restructured the Donovan Foundation's board, replacing old family friends with advisors from universities, orphan networks, and public welfare offices. The elite scoffed. They whispered, but the headlines spoke louder. Heir rewrites, legacy, Max Donovan turned scandal into reform. Once silent, now unstoppable, the new face of wealth. Yet through it all, I never chased revenge. I just lived, and somehow, that punished them more than rage ever could. A month later, I received a letter postmarked from the prison. No name. Just a few folded pages. Brandon's handwriting. I built everything thinking legacy was about control. Turns out it's about memory. You'll be remembered better than I ever was, and that's what burns the most. I read it once, then burned it. The ashes floated over the estate's garden where I used to scrape mud from the tiles. Now it was filled with blooms. Bonnie joined me later that evening. She brought tea. Still black, no sugar. Some things never change. We sat on the bench in silence until the sun dipped low. "You could have destroyed him completely," she said softly. "Why didn't you?" I sipped my tea. "Because men like him only win when they make you like them." She looked at me, eyes warm. "So what will you do now?" "Live," I said. "Really live. No shadows. No silence." Bonnie smiled. "And maybe let someone love you this time?" I looked at her. "I already do," I said. even when I tried not to. She reached for my hand. This time, I didn't pull away. 3 months later, Brandon was sentenced. 12 years, no parole. Cynthia disappeared from public view, quietly building a new life in a different city, far from her father's name. She sent me a postcard once, no words, just a photo of a beach. I took it as closure. As for me, I published a book. They hid my identity to raise her instead. Now she cleans my floors. A memoir. Raw. Unfiltered. Ruthless in its honesty. It hit the bestseller list in 3 weeks. Bonnie edited the final draft. Chris, the estate's new legal advisor, joked about movie rights. Just laughed. Because I already had what I wanted. I had truth, peace, and power that didn't come from a signature, but from survival. The day I took down Brandon, I didn't just reclaim a name. I reclaimed myself. And no one will ever take that from me again.